Let's again welcome the filmmakers. We'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A.
Thank you for staying and sticking around. I just want to introduce my producing partner, Sebastian Dungan. This is the first screening we've been here without Bob, Robert Reich. So I'm sorry you had to miss him, but he sends his love. Trust me.
What do you hope? How do you hope to distribute this information? I mean, this is not something that everybody's going to pay to see, but it's not something that everybody's going to watch on PBS. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. I just don't know how you go about distributing this kind of thing.
Well, it just got bought, so there's that. So the Weinstein Company and their Radius division is going to distribute it. So that's very exciting news for us. I happen to think everybody can take this information, but I appreciate the comment, and I think everybody should get it. So hopefully we'll get it out there. Oh, could I follow up to that? Just I'm sorry, and then I'll take your question. One thing is I've always thought of this film as outreach, as education, and I believe this is the center of what I hope is a whole bunch of efforts to try and put this topic a little bit more back on the national discussion level. So, in conjunction with this film, we're hoping to do a whole bunch of stuff that helps make this a topic everybody's focused on. And now, we'll take that other question.
Yeah, I guess in the film, he seems to indicate this has been like a 30-plus year evolution to get into the suit that we're in now. I didn't see any color, but has he expressed color on, is this something that realistically can be remedied, in our lifetime, or is it going to take another 30 to 40 years to get out of this pickle and straighten things out? Can things change? Does he believe things can change and remedy that quickly if it's taken us 30, 40 years to get into this situation?
Yeah, well, as he says several times in the film, he's an optimist. And what he says when people challenge him on this stuff is that we've done it several times. That what happens is that the system gets so far out of whack, and he mentions a few of them. One was in the 1890s when the first big progressive movement hit, that first Roosevelt, and then again with the New Deal, and we can do it again. And the big things that get really bad, but as he says in the film, when the difference between the world we live in and the world we want to live in is so extreme, that's the sort of space where social change happens, and it's we're getting there. I can't say if it's today or tomorrow or soon, but I hope it's in the near future.
Yeah, what was the point in your life when you decided that this story needed to be made? Was it seeing people march on Wall Street, or was there some other critical trigger for you?
Question was, when in my life did I think this film had to be made? Well, I grew up pretty consciously aware of who has what in society. It was just something I was always born with. It was part of how I saw the world. But 2008 and the crash scared me, and I started to have all these discussions with my friends about what the direction America was going in, and my fears for the future, both because for my own economic security and all of the people who I knew, and we were all worried, and I wished I had a story that kind of put it all together and made sense of it all for me. And I sort of felt after the crash of 2008 personally that the more news I watched, and I was kind of obsessively watching the news, the kind of less I understood. That I felt like people were yelling back and forth at each other, that it all became about if you were a Republican or a Democrat, and less about sort of getting the story. And I was sort of desperate for it. So when I met him and we became friends, and I read that book that this is based on, which I highly recommend, Aftershock, he was telling this story that said all of these sort of little pieces, you could connect these dots together, from the political polarization to the struggling middle class, to the rising cost of higher education, to healthcare, to just all these things that were I didn't necessarily see as interconnected until he put it in this story, and it felt like it made sense for my worldview.
How did Secretary Reich feel about this film? Did he feel that all of what he wanted to get across did get across, were there pieces of it that did not get in? I was curious about how he responded.
Question is, what did Secretary Reich think of the film? He loves it. He really, really loves it. And I can tell you a story about it, which is kind of interesting, which is his son. You see a little picture of his kids in shot from the Clinton administration. His son came to the first screening a week ago. We've only had this film done for about a week. And his son came to the first screening, and he said after the screening, "Dad, I've been listening to you talk my whole life, and I never understood what the hell it was until I saw this film." And it was this really emotional moment, actually, because he didn't actually realize that he'd been talking about this stuff for 35 years. I mean, he's just been living, you know, fighting and waking up every day and trying to put one foot in front of the other. So I think when he saw this film, it was an emotional journey for him, because I think he realized that this has been something he's been working on for a long time.
Sir?
So there's kind of a paradigm shift that's going to have to happen where greed is attached with shame. And that hasn't happened in this country yet. But once that does, I think this whole thing does start to happen. But don't you feel that until, as a world community, we attach some shame to greed, we can't really get there?
I totally respect your point, and I think it is true that there is a moral aspect to this question. And I think that one of the triggers for social change, whether it be a woman sitting, you know, refusing to give up her seat on a bus, or whatever your sort of example is throughout history, comes when there's a kind of collective retching of a society. They just can't imagine that this is the world that they live in, and they have to see it fixed. Those are important component to it. There's also sort of, I believe, and I believed in the making of this film, that there needs to be a kind of intellectual kind of infrastructure to the words that we're bandying about, like 99% and 1%. People have to have a deeper understanding of this stuff before social change can happen as well. So I think both of those things together are what's necessary.
Why did you not include other voices, like Paul Krugman or so?
Question is, why didn't we include other voices? Clarity, simplicity and clarity. I mean, I feel like this was the clearest way to tell this story, was through his eyes. Personal, you know, decision, I guess.
Ma'am?
The bridge graphic is really interesting, but it's a slice of time. I think that if we're thinking about things getting better, the bridge graphic goes like this, but it's gonna go down again. And we better be ready for that kind of change. I think it only shows that slice, only high and high, but what's low? And what does low look like?
Well, there's two parts to my answer to that, and the one is that the low part is in the middle of the century, you know, and that's when we were much more equal and the economy was growing really well. However, I take your point and I trouble over it, because which is that you assume that it's going to fix itself if it's a bridge, like it'll go back down again, or that's how that would be. The other side of it, though, is it's nice to have these metaphors that we can take with us, and the first thing that made me want to make the film is seeing that graph. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is like a suspension bridge. I can't believe it was 1928 and 2007. It just blew my mind that the years after the two biggest years of income inequality of the last century were the 2 years directly preceding the biggest crashes of the century. So, you know, visuals won out there, but, you know, good point.
So to piggyback on the, thank you for viewing the film, by the way. To piggyback on the morality thing, 10 years ago I was packing for a war in Iraq, which coupled with Afghanistan is $3.7 trillion in counting. That could go a long way towards education. And so I'm wondering, from a storytelling point of view, that had to just be like a decision that's such a huge piece or whatever. And that, it seems like, you know, one sort of thing that would almost fix it. If we took that money and put it in a place that would help to build a middle class.
Well, it's a good point that the question of military spending being completely out of control. And I think there's a way to tie that into widening income inequality, but we just didn't, you know, for focus, it's just probably another great movie, and I'm sure somebody made it, yeah.
Hey, I guess, could I ask you if you would maybe a message for Robert? I thought one of the most poignant points was where he was reflecting on, has he really made a difference? And I think his legacy remains to be seen. I think he has, and I hope he knows that. The other thing, the question is, what's the current administration? I mean, I hope you'll send them a copy.
Question is, if he feels like a failure, or I guess the comment more was if he feels like a failure, he isn't. You know, his legacy is still being built. And the second part is the current administration going to see the film? The answer is almost certainly yes. I mean, there's been all this talk since this film has been received this week about showing it at the White House very soon, maybe on the floor of Congress. And I think it's part of getting this film out. We want to show it in every single state legislature in the country if we get a chance as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Here, sir.
I don't know if this is a question you can answer, if Robert would be able to, but what is the correlation between income inequality and some of these other factors that have a big effect on the economy, like cheap oil and the finiteness of cheap energy and those kind of matters as well?
Question is about energy. I think the cost of energy and its relationship to income inequality. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, energy markets have to do a lot with speculation now, right? Like that sort of affects the prices of that. But the financial sector and the speculative markets go nuts when income inequality goes up. And one of the craziest things in this film was seeing the parallels between the growth of the financial sector through the 20s up to the Great Crash, up to the Great Depression and the Great Recession of 2007. You see the speculative markets going nuts. The stories of people, you know, I'll sell you a piece of the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't know if you have that story as much in Utah, but where I grew up in New York, they certainly had that story. And that was because people were selling things speculatively like crazy then. One thing I also want to make a point, because I believe it's important, is that there was no study of economics until this century, so some of these stats don't go back into the 1800s. In the 1800s, people who studied economics were called economic philosophers. Or no, economic philosophers, and John Smith, in his day, was called a moral philosopher. So the question of economics used to be about what kind of society do we want to live in? How do we want to organize it properly? And I think it's gotten a little bit too specific to just numbers going up and down. And I hope this film, and that when people receive it, they think about what kind of society they want to live in versus, you know, the study of economics from a different way. I just wanted to, sorry, that was a somewhat unrelated point. I felt like making it so.
We'll do two more, and sir.
So honestly, what was it like to work with him?
Question is, what was it like to work with him? He and I are dear friends, and it's an absolute inspiration to be around him. And I was impressed by him before I met him, and the more I've gotten to know him, the better he is. He's a warm heart, he's brilliant, and I don't know, I can't say enough positive stuff around him. One of the crazy and most interesting things, and maybe Sebastian can, what's it like to meet him when you don't know him?
I've probably never in my life been more starstruck by somebody. The first time I met him, I was so incredibly nervous. And mostly I just thought that I wouldn't be able to string a sentence together and sound cogent and intelligent, and I felt like a kid going to see the principal or something like that. And he just put us all at ease really quickly. And what's really funny is that we've seen this repeated a couple of times, most recently with the people at the Weinstein Company who bought the movie, who came to meet us and said they could barely get out words because they were so nervous at meeting me. I don't know why. I guess people are really impressed by him or think he's going to be some big brain or something. And he's actually the most down-to-earth guy you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, he scares people in a good way. So.
And then one more right here, sir.
How did you find the 1% guy that spoke so candidly about the 1% gave us a pretty good job?
Well, how do we find the 1% guy? Well, we were reading about it, you know, reading about this topic incessantly. I mean, I don't have an economics or political background, but I read a lot, and all of us had to read like crazy to get this film together. And he had a TED Talk, honestly, one of those talks that they put online that was censored, or supposedly censored. There was a little bit of a controversy around it. And I remember reading about this controversy, and then he was in another article, and there was a debate in our, not a debate, a discussion about the making of this film, if we wanted somebody who didn't agree with us, or who was gonna, you know, be a little bit more adversarial in that sort of particular spot in the film, or if we wanted somebody like him. And he blew us away, because he's absolutely passionate capitalist, and he's also absolutely passionately railing against widening income inequality, because he thinks it makes his business opportunities go down. And that is what we need, you know, that's the story. I mean, or that's the thing, because it's bad for our economy and it's bad for our democracy, and both of those things are bad for business, you know, from his perspective. Hey, thank you so much.
I apologize for the heat in here, everybody.